Imagine waking up before sunrise to a sound you've never heard before. The fire that kept your family alive through the night is almost gone. Beyond its fading glow, the darkness is filled with eyes you can't see, only sense. Somewhere, a child begins to cry. No one moves. Everyone waits. Because one wrong decision before daylight could mean no one sees tomorrow. When we picture ancient humans, we usually imagine dramatic dangers, charging predators, freezing winters, or desperate hunts. Those threats were real. But here's the strange part. None of them may have been the hardest part of being human. Think about that for a second. A lion could kill you in moments. A storm might trap you for days. Hunger eventually ended if food was found. But there was another challenge that never truly disappeared. It followed people every waking hour, and even in sleep, it never completely let go. Imagine living in a world where every decision could change your future. Should you stay with your group or search alone for food? Should you trust the strangers standing across the valley? Should you cross the river before the rains came? Every choice was a gamble, and there were no maps, no doctors, no rescue teams, and no second chances. You'd think surviving depended on being the strongest, it didn't. Again and again, archaeologists uncover evidence that even powerful hunters died young, while others with serious injuries somehow lived for years. That should have answered the question. Instead, it created an even bigger mystery. So if predators, cold, and hunger weren't the greatest challenge, then what was the hardest part of being an ancient human? That's the mystery we're about to uncover. The obvious answer seems almost too simple. The hardest part of being an ancient human was survival itself. And at first glance, the evidence appears overwhelming. Imagine standing on an open plain with nothing but a sharpened wooden spear between you and a predator weighing hundreds of pounds. There were no hospitals waiting if you were injured, no supermarkets if the hunt failed, no warm houses when winter arrived. Every meal had to be earned, every shelter had to be built, and every sunrise brought another test. Researchers studying ancient bones have found fractures, bite marks, and healed injuries that tell remarkable stories. Some people survived broken limbs. Others carried scars from violent animal attacks. Their skeletons reveal lives filled with danger long before written history ever existed. Picture a hunting party tracking a massive animal for hours under the blazing sun. One mistake could mean starvation for the entire group. Even success came at a price. A wounded animal could turn and kill the hunters in seconds. Then there was the environment itself. A sudden drought could dry up familiar water sources. A freezing winter could wipe out food supplies. Heavy rains could force entire groups to abandon places they had known for generations. Nature wasn't simply difficult, it was unpredictable. So it seems obvious that the greatest challenge was surviving a hostile world. But then archaeologists began noticing something strange. Some individuals who suffered horrific injuries didn't die. They lived for years afterward, even though they couldn't have hunted or defended themselves alone. Meanwhile, perfectly healthy adults sometimes disappeared from the archaeological record without any sign of violence at all. That shouldn't have happened. If survival was only about defeating nature, these discoveries make very little sense. And that's where the mystery becomes far more interesting. The common belief is that ancient humans survived because the strongest individuals always came out on top. Bigger muscles meant better hunters. Better hunters meant more food. More food meant a better chance of staying alive. It sounds logical, but when researchers looked closer, that story began to fall apart. Across Europe, Africa, and Asia, archaeologists uncovered skeletons that shouldn't have existed. Some belonged to people who had lost the use of an arm. Others had badly damaged legs, shattered hips, or severe illnesses that would have made hunting almost impossible. Yet many of these injuries had completely healed. Think about what that means. Healing takes weeks, sometimes months. A person unable to hunt couldn't simply feed themselves. Someone who couldn't walk couldn't keep up with a migrating group. Left alone, they almost certainly would have died, but they didn't. Someone gathered food for them. Someone protected them while they recovered. Someone chose to slow down instead of leaving them behind. That discovery changed everything. Perhaps survival wasn't won by the strongest person, perhaps it was won by the strongest group. Imagine a small band of ancient humans preparing to leave a valley before winter. Carrying an injured companion would slow everyone down. It would consume precious food. It would increase the risk for the entire group. From a purely survival standpoint, abandoning that person seems like the obvious choice, yet the evidence suggests they often made the opposite decision. Pretty strange, right? If ancient life was already a constant struggle against hunger, predators, and the weather, why would anyone take on an extra burden? Why risk the survival of many for the survival of one? That should have solved the mystery. Instead, it opened an even bigger one. Maybe the hardest part of being an ancient human wasn't surviving nature at all. Maybe it was surviving each other, learning who to trust, who to protect, and who was worth risking everything for. The idea that cooperation kept ancient humans alive sounded convincing, but researchers still faced a difficult question. How much did helping others actually matter? To find the answer, they turned to one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries ever made. In a cave in northern Iraq, archaeologists uncovered the skeleton of a man who had lived tens of thousands of years ago. At first, his bones looked ordinary, but as scientists examined them more closely, an extraordinary story began to emerge. His right arm had been severely damaged, possibly missing below the elbow. One leg showed signs of serious injury. He had likely lost sight in one eye. Even his hearing may have been impaired. You'd expect someone with injuries like these to have died soon after they happened. He didn't. The evidence showed that he survived for years, possibly decades, after suffering them. Think about what that really means. This wasn't a person who could easily chase prey across open land or defend himself from every danger. Day after day, someone had to share food with him. Someone had to protect him while the group moved. Someone had to believe his life was still worth the effort. Researchers weren't just looking at a skeleton anymore. They were looking at proof that compassion existed long before cities, governments, or written laws. That discovery changed the conversation. Maybe intelligence wasn't humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage. Maybe kindness was. But just when that explanation seemed to fit, another puzzle appeared. If ancient humans were willing to care for the weak, why do archaeologists also find evidence of violence, betrayal, and deadly conflict between people living in the very same era? How could a species capable of incredible compassion also become one of the most dangerous threats to its own survival? That contradiction would lead researchers toward an even deeper answer, one that reached far beyond survival itself. Imagine being born into an ancient hunting band nearly 30,000 years ago. You're not the fastest runner. You're not the strongest hunter. As a child, you watch the adults disappear beyond the hills each morning, carrying nothing but wooden spears and hope. Some return with food, others don't return at all. Then one day, everything changes. A respected hunter is badly injured during a hunt. Whether it was an angry bison, a fall onto sharp rocks, or a charging predator, no one knows. What everyone does know is that he can no longer keep up with the group. Now the tribe faces a choice. Food is already scarce. Winter is approaching. Every extra mouth means fewer chances for everyone else. Logic says they should leave him behind, but they don't. Instead, the pace of the entire group slows. Hunters begin sharing part of their hard-earned meals. Others help him walk from one campsite to the next. Around the evening fire, he can no longer lead the hunt, but he still tells stories. He remembers where rivers stay full during droughts. He knows which valleys predators avoid and which plants become poisonous after heavy rain. Slowly, the tribe realizes something unexpected. His greatest value was never his strength. It was everything he carried inside his mind. That idea echoes through archaeology again and again. Older individuals often survived long after their physical peak, suggesting they continued to play an important role within their communities. Their experience may have been just as valuable as fresh muscles. Think about that. The hardest part of being an ancient human wasn't simply staying alive. It was making impossible decisions about one another, choosing when to compete, when to sacrifice, and when a single person's knowledge was worth more than another person's strength. And once researchers recognized that pattern, they began seeing it everywhere. At this point, it starts to look like caring for others was simply a human trait. But then researchers noticed something even more surprising. The same pattern wasn't limited to humans at all. Imagine a herd of elephants. When one member is injured, the others often slow their pace. Mothers help exhaust calves. Adults have even been observed returning to support weak companions that can no longer keep up. Out in the ocean, dolphins have been seen lifting sick pod members to the surface so they can breathe. Even wolves, famous for their hunting skills, regularly share food with older pack members that can no longer chase prey. Pretty strange, right? Across completely different species, survival wasn't always about the strongest individual. It was about the strongest relationships. Then archaeologists began seeing the very same pattern across human history. Whether they examined Ice Age hunter-gatherers in Europe, early communities in Africa, ancient settlements in Asia, or the first farming villages of the Middle East, one idea kept appearing. The groups that endured weren't simply those with better weapons or bigger bodies. They were the ones that learned to cooperate under impossible conditions. Imagine two neighboring tribes facing the same brutal winter. Both have skilled hunters, both know the land, both face the same predators, but one tribe shares food, passes knowledge from elders to children, and protects injured members until they recover. The other is divided by fear, distrust, and constant conflict. Years later, which group is more likely to survive? The archaeological record points in the same direction again and again. Civilizations changed, landscapes changed, climates changed. Yet one pattern refused to disappear. The greatest advantage humans ever developed wasn't sharper teeth or greater strength. It was the ability to build trust with people who depended on one another. But that raises an uncomfortable question. If cooperation made our species so successful, why has human history also been filled with betrayal, war, and violence? To answer that, we have to look at the rare moments when this ancient survival strategy broke down completely. But human cooperation wasn't a rule without exceptions. Sometimes, survival demanded the exact opposite. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient sites where skeletons bear unmistakable signs of violent deaths, crushed skulls, embedded spear points, and mass graves that tell stories of entire communities wiped out in a single event. Instead of protecting one another, people became the greatest danger they faced. What changed? Usually, the answer wasn't human nature, it was desperation. Imagine a valley after months of drought. The rivers have shrunk, animals have migrated away, the last edible plants are disappearing. Two groups arrive at the same water source, and neither has enough food to survive another week. Suddenly, cooperation has limits. Helping your own family may mean refusing help to someone else. Trust gives way to suspicion. A stranger is no longer a potential ally, but another mouth competing for the same shrinking resources. Researchers have also found evidence that some ancient groups abandoned the elderly or injured during periods of extreme environmental stress. It wasn't necessarily because they lacked compassion. Sometimes the harsh reality was that carrying one person could mean losing everyone. Think about how impossible those choices must have been. The same species capable of incredible kindness could also make heartbreaking decisions when survival hung by a thread. That's what makes the archaeological record so fascinating. It doesn't tell a story of perfect heroes or ruthless survivors. It tells the story of ordinary people constantly balancing compassion against necessity. And that balance reveals something extraordinary. The hardest part of being an ancient human was never simply choosing between life and death. It was deciding whose life could still be saved. That realization leads directly to the deepest answer of all. By now, the clues begin to fit together. The predators weren't the real mystery. The freezing winters weren't the real mystery. Even hunger wasn't the real mystery. Those were problems every animal on Earth had to face. Humans faced something else. Imagine carrying a fire through the wilderness. The flames keep your family alive, but they also demand constant attention. Ignore them for a single night, and they disappear. Human society worked the same way. It wasn't something evolution simply handed us. It had to be maintained every single day. Trust had to be earned. Knowledge had to be shared. Children had to be taught. The injured had to be protected. Disagreements had to be settled before they tore the group apart. For ancient humans, survival wasn't a battle against nature. It was a battle against the collapse of cooperation. That's the hidden story. Researchers studying human evolution have reached an extraordinary realization. Compared with other predators, humans aren't exceptionally fast. We aren't exceptionally strong. We don't have claws, thick fur, or powerful jaws. On our own, we're surprisingly vulnerable. Yet together, we became the most successful large mammals the planet has ever seen. Not because evolution made us unbeatable, because it made us dependent on one another. Think about what that really means. The hardest part of being an ancient human wasn't killing a mammoth or escaping a lion. It was waking up every day and choosing to trust people who could save your life or end it. Every shared meal was an act of trust. Every hunt required absolute cooperation. Every campfire depended on dozens of invisible promises being kept. The moment those promises broke, the group became weaker than any predator waiting beyond the firelight. And perhaps that's why archaeologists don't just uncover stone tools and ancient bones. They uncover evidence of relationships. Because civilization didn't begin when humans built the first cities. It began the moment people realized that surviving together was more powerful than surviving alone. Suddenly, the title has a completely different answer. The hardest part of being an ancient human wasn't surviving the world. It was learning how to survive with other humans, because that single challenge would shape everything our species would become. Now, return to that campfire. The flames are burning low. Beyond the circle of light, the night is as dangerous as ever. Somewhere in the darkness, predators are still waiting. The cold hasn't disappeared. Tomorrow's food is still uncertain, and yet those were never the greatest threats. The real question was whether the people sitting around that fire would still be there for one another when the sun came up. Imagine that for a moment. Every story ever told, every civilization ever built, every discovery, invention, and city that would one day reshape the world began with small groups of ancient humans making one extraordinary decision: to trust. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because surviving alone was almost impossible. That's the hidden truth behind our story. Evolution didn't simply reward the fastest runners or the strongest fighters. It rewarded the people who could build relationships strong enough to outlast fear, hunger, and uncertainty. Long before humans learned to write laws or raise monuments, they were already creating something far more powerful: the invisible bonds that held a group together. So the hardest part of being an ancient human wasn't fighting nature. It was choosing, day after day, to believe that the person sitting beside your fire would protect it with you. And perhaps, after thousands of generations, that still's the hardest part of being human today.